Good evening. Thank you all for being here, virtual or in person. This is my first go at a virtual event, and I thank you all for participating, and I'm humbled that we're a place of comfort to be able to offer you at this time. I'm Cindy Pagankoff with Pagankoff Funeral Home, and we've been a part of the community since 1913, so about 109 years. And there is grief, and we need to help support our community. And I'm honored to be able to provide this to our community with help from the Grief Training Center of Wisconsin. We have Melissa, Daryl, and Kathy here to help walk through this. And they are experts in this field, and I can't wait to be able to help share that with all of you, either here or virtually. So thank you so much, and I'm going to turn the mic over to Melissa and enjoy. Thank you.
Yes. I would first like to begin by thanking Cindy and Kevin Pagankoff for not only recognizing the importance of coming together to talk about grief. It's not a topic that we enjoy talking about, but it's definitely needed. But not only did they recognize that, they were creative enough to figure out how to do this in a time where it's difficult for us to come together, and they figured out how to do it safely for those of you who are here with us tonight, as well as creatively figuring out how to stream this live so that we can reach out to more people. Pagankoff Funeral Home has always been really good about being attentive to the needs of the families that they serve, but they also are good about making sure that their community is taken care of as well. So thank you very much, Kevin and Cindy, for offering this. I'm Melissa Minkley, and I am the program director for the Grief Training Center of Wisconsin. And grief is something that I'm very familiar with. Unfortunately, as a young child, I've endured a number of losses and continued to endure losses over the years into my adult years. And one of the things that I recognize is what I needed most. What I needed most from my family, from friends, from acquaintances, from coworkers, is I needed my grief acknowledged. And sometimes people were really good about doing that, but not always. And so tonight, what we're going to do is really spend some time not only understanding grief, because when we understand grief, we're better able to manage it and cope with it, but also to provide you with some insight and some suggestions on how to help make the holidays more meaningful and memorable and manageable during this difficult time. So that's what tonight is all about. Before we begin, I invite you, those of you that are here, as well as those of you at home, please take a deep breath. Breathe in. Allow yourself to be here, to fully be here now. Give yourself permission to receive what is going to be offered tonight, but also acknowledge the fact that being here, physically being here, those of you who walked through those doors and sat down, and those of you at home who clicked the link that was sent to you, we recognize that takes courage. And so I hope that you honor that with yourself and recognize that with yourself, that being here requires courage. And you should give yourself a pat on the back for that. So take a few more deep breaths in and exhale and release any worries of the day, and just allow yourself to fully be present here with us tonight. We're going to begin with a candlelight ceremony. And we light these candles not just a tribute to and in honor of our loved ones, but also in honor of all of you. As you see, there's 5 candles, and we're going to light a candle that represents your grief, your courage. It's going to represent our memories, our love, and our hope. The first candle we light represents grief. The pain of losing you, missing you, and longing for you can be intense. Though our grief reminds us the depth of our love. The second candle we light represents our courage. It takes courage to comfort and to enter sorrow, to adjust and to adapt to the many changes in our lives. The third candle represents memories. The time we laughed and the time we cried. The serious times and the silly times. Memories of past holidays and all the traditions we created together. The fourth candle represents our love. We cherish the special place in our hearts that will always be reserved for you. Thank you for the gift your living brought to each of us. And the last candle we light is for hope. Within us, we carry this light of hope. Inside us, as we continue on this journey, realizing we have a responsibility to live our lives in such a way that both honors you and ourselves. Tonight we're going to talk not only about grief, but we're also going to talk about the holidays. We invite you to ask and share questions, as well as you at home. If you would like to send us a message, you're welcome to do that as well. I'm going to invite Daryl Powers to come up and share with you a little bit about his experience with grief, as well as suggestions and thoughts that he has to help make these holidays a little bit more manageable and memorable for all of you that are grieving the loss of a loved one this time of the year.
"'Tis the season to be jolly." For some of us, grieving the loss of a loved one, maybe not so much. Maybe the Christmas carols and the chestnuts roasting on an open fire don't quite have the same appeal they've had in the past. Maybe the joy of the season is a little bit more difficult to see through the fog of grief. The holidays do bring about some challenges. Two in particular that I can think of. Number one, I think we've taken something as simple and as pure and as powerful as the birth of Jesus Christ, and we've surrounded it with clutter. We've surrounded it with hustle and bustle, activities and shopping and lists and menus and all sorts of commitments and expectations and all these things that we surround this event. Take this celebration and we really complicate it. Now, whether or not you believe Jesus is the Messiah, certainly it's undisputed that he was a tremendous example of what we say we want today. It's compassion, caring, love, forgiveness. Someone who serves. Certainly a birthday worth celebrating. The second thing we do is we turn towards family. The Christmas season, and I'm going to squeeze Thanksgiving into this as well. These two holidays in particular, right, tend to turn us towards our families. And that can be amazing. It can be wonderful. But frankly, that can be a challenge. Some families don't get along very well, right? There's sometimes maybe it's just one person or a couple of people in the family, and then there's workarounds, and there's a challenge, and there's anxiety built around it. That can add a lot to us over the holiday season. You take all that, and now you layer on top of that a big heap of grief from losing a loved one. It can become overwhelming. So why do I talk about this with such confidence? I'll give you a little bit of background about myself. Actually, I live in Waukesha, Wisconsin, now not far from here. I was born and raised in Oconomowoc. In my high school years, my home was just in eyesight of this building. It's kind of interesting how life sometimes circles you back around. I've got 3 kids, 2 daughters of my own, and a stepson. My oldest daughter is 19. My youngest is almost 16, and my stepson just turned 14 last week. I'm married, happily, to a wonderful woman. Her name's Judy. It's my second marriage. My first marriage ended just over 13 years ago. It was taken from me. Stolen. 3 years prior to that, breast cancer invaded my home. It attacked my wife. It killed her. The worst part about it is it happened right in front of us. We had to watch it. Powerless. We couldn't do anything to stop it. Neither could she. The years and months surrounding that time were a great challenge, and the grieving that carried afterwards definitely had its share of difficulties. When I think about it, I think about something like this. A big ball of mess. Because in this ball is my life, my responsibilities, my children, my friends, my family, the love I had for my wife, pain, anguish, grief, all bundled up into here. But in here as well, there was joy, real joy. But in a mess like this, it's hard to find it. You can go for a long time searching. Sometimes you just continue to pick the wrong band. People would give me all sorts of advice, especially as a young father. At the time, my daughters were very young, ages 2 and 5 when they lost their mother. So I had a lot of opinion and advice, and much of it was very good. Wonderful. But people would say, Daryl, try this, maybe do that. You're grieving, I know it's like this. Well, okay, you're trying to help me solve a problem. It's this. Listen, but look, you can't just separate this out. You can't just tell me to do something or give me this idea or this suggestion, and it's not going to fix this. This all comes with it. That was the challenge I faced. That's the challenge I think a lot of us face when we grieve loss. It's not just one thing. It's all of this. It's the joy and the pain all mixed up together. And it's very difficult to separate it. I share that with you because I want you to be very clear that I genuinely appreciate your experience. And I don't even know your experience. But I know mine. And I know what it was like, and I know what it felt like. Right? Our grief it's most important to us. Sure, we have others that are concerned about us and others around us who we have concern for. But it's our grief that's the one that we live with. It's the one we wake up with. It's the one we go to bed with. It's the one we can't sleep with. It's the one that packs our stomach with tension. That's the one that matters. So I'm here tonight to let you know that I very much appreciate your experience. I respect it. I also want you to know that I'm honored to be here. I'm honored that you'll spend your time to hear what I have to say. And I want you to be clear that just because I'm up here speaking, that I by no means think that my story or my grief was more important, or that my story is more dramatic, or that there's something special about my experience. It just happens to be mine. Because yours is the one that's important. And I recognize that. Okay, so I want to make you aware of that. Because grief, it's funny because it also has a commonality to it. There's a certain bond for those who've lost someone they love. A bit of an understanding. Because the impact of grief is universal. Everybody experiences it. Right? We were born to die. And when we love, we grieve. Yeah, think about the example of a little child. Right? A little child on a summer day with an ice cream cone. Maybe think about ourselves. Right? Back then, we had our ice cream cone. Oh, it was a jewel. It was wonderful. It was our prize. We valued it very much. It was very important to us. And then you know what happens, especially with a young child. Eventually, right? Down it goes, onto the ground. Now the first thing that the kid does, and you guys might remember when you were a child, it's not all gone, right? It might be damaged, but I can still get some of that. I want some of that. I don't want to let that go. And then the parent or the sibling or somebody grabs the child's arm, pulls them away. No, you leave that behind. That's not for you anymore. You can't have that. And the child sees it, right? They recognize, what they prized is gone. And then what happens, right? The impact of grief. Pow, screaming, crying, dropping to their knees. That's true loss. In that child's world, that is a big, big problem. It is a big impact. And we recognize that. Grief and that impact is universal. We can see it across the world. You see an image of someone in India, or the Philippines, anywhere. And you see an image of someone crying because they lost a loved one. And you see it in their face, the tears, the pain, the anguish that they carry. We don't need to know them or even understand their culture to recognize, yep, they're hurting badly. There's a commonality to that. It is indeed universal. Now, our experience of grief, our own grief, that is unique. It's unique to us. Because our experience of grief and our grieving experience, that's unique because our circumstances are unique. My life is unique to me. And the circumstances that surrounded the death of my wife was my circumstance. I was her only husband. I was my children's only father. No one else could share that with me. It's very unique. And our relationships are unique. So even though you can have someone very similar in terms of their story, the experience can be much different. I used to travel quite a bit in my previous careers. And I remember spending some time in an airport. In this case, it was Newark, New Jersey. And I don't know if any of you have ever spent any time in the Newark airport, but anything within maybe a 60-minute delay is pretty good. That's considered on time because the delays can easily be hours. And this was one of those evenings where the delays were hours. And I had met a young man at the time, roughly my age, and he too lost his wife to breast cancer, and he had 2 kids. In his case, they were boys. So we had a lot of commonalities. We ended up talking. In fact, we went and had a beer together. We had plenty of time to kill, and we talked for quite a while. And boy, our stories had so many similarities. But yet there was big differences. They lived in another part of the country. His relationships were different. His wife was a completely different person than mine was. I was different than he was. So even though our stories were very, very closely matched, our experience was still widely different. So there was a commonality because of the impact of grief, but yet our experience was unique. Now, how we mourn our loss, mourning is the expression of our grief. That is very personal. Okay? It's very personal. Because that's a little bit more in tune with how we're wired. Right? Our personality. It's why you can see 2 siblings that are even very close in age, same parents, same environmental structure, everything, and completely different behaviors. Almost like 2 completely different families. How can that be? It's because of who they are as individuals. So when grieving a loss, even in their own family, their experience with that and how they express it can be 2 completely different things, depending on how they feel and how they express their own emotions, their behaviors, depending on the relationship that they had with that person. So it's important to keep that in mind because it's a bit of a perspective when we look at our journey through grief and we consider others, and also when we sometimes hear some of their input on our experience. It's important to recognize that there indeed are some commonalities, and there's some great strength in that, and we need to take advantage of that when we can. But also to know, even though there's commonalities, everyone's experience is different, and the way they express their experience is unique and personal to them. A few years after my wife passed away, there was a little restaurant in Waukesha, and occasionally I would go there after work to finish up some work. And it was 5:30 on a Thursday afternoon, Thursday evening, so it was a very bare restaurant. Nobody was in there. They were prepping kind of for rush hour. So it was a nice place to get some work done. I would get a little food. They had great food. And I got to know the people. Got to know the bartender, the chef. He would come out and he'd give me little samples on occasion because he got to know me, and the wait staff. And there was a waitress who, over time I got to know her a little bit. And she said, "Daryl, I want to tell you about something. I got to tell you. I want your opinion on this." And she knew my story. And I said, "Sure." She said, I lost my mom about a year ago, and I think it was leukemia. I'm not positive, but I think that's what it was. I lost my mom, and my dad, he's not doing well. He is not handling this well at all. Wow, what's he doing? Well, apparently, according to her, what he would do every night is he would go out into the backyard and sit at a fire pit, light a fire, and sit there by himself. And just sit, sometimes for hours. Even in inclement weather. Didn't stop him. He said, "Yeah, it's a problem, Daryl. I'm concerned about him. He needs some help." Even the neighbors had talked to her and said, "Hey, this isn't right. It's even a little weird. Can you do something? Help this guy." He did this for months. So I asked her. I didn't know. So why does he do that? Big pause. Right? She hadn't asked him. I said, "Well, I don't know. Maybe ask him. See what he says." So I hadn't been there in a few weeks, and some time went by, and then the next time that I was there, about a month or so later, sure enough, I saw her again. And she said, "Daryl, you got to listen to what happened here." Apparently, she went and she sat with her father one night. Sat there for a couple of hours with him. She said he'd hardly said anything. She said it wasn't like a problem. They sat, but she said, "Man, it was just uncomfortable. Couldn't get him to talk. He just would sit there and stare at that fire and put a log on it here and there." She left. She went back a few days later, did the same thing. This time only I sat with him for a little while because I guess it was blustery and cold, and she said he didn't matter to him. She went back a third time. Couldn't take it anymore. Finally said, Dad, I love you. But I'm concerned. You need some help. You sit out here every night with this fire. The neighbors are talking. I don't know what you do. You don't talk to anybody. You sit here and you mope around. And I want to get you some help. We're going to get you see somebody, something. And her father turned to her and said, well, honey, do you know why I do this? Do you know why? She hadn't asked. He said, this fire pit, I built this for your mother. She wanted this. I designed it for her. Even some of the rocks and the stones in here, they're special to us. This is her fire pit. But I finished it in the fall of last year. And she died this winter. She never got to sit and watch the fire in the fire pit that he had built for her. So that's why I sit here. Because your mother is here. She's here with us right now. So every night I come out here and I spend time with my wife, the woman who I love and the woman who I miss every night. And this is our time. So I don't care what you or the neighbors think, I'm going to continue to do this. Wow. On one hand, someone from looking at somebody mourning, expressing their grief in a way that they didn't understand. Her perspective was, it's a problem. It needs to be fixed. There needs to be a solution. Maybe it's a diagnosis or medication. Or is it grief? Is it someone who loves and cares and deeply misses? Same situation, two completely different answers. So it's important that we take that into consideration when we consider our own grief and how we express it. Take some pressure off ourselves in terms of what some of the expectations we might have on ourselves. Because we do. Sometimes we put expectations on how we should grieve. Maybe I should cry more. Maybe I'm not crying enough. Maybe I cry too much. I don't know. It's your experience. It's your loss. You decide. And if you can't decide, just roll with it. Let it happen. Because healthy grieving requires really three cornerstones, three important things. Number one, it's important that we honor our grief. We honor it. What do we do when we honor something? Well, we attend to it. We place value and importance upon it. We turn towards it. We want to be closer to it. We involve ourselves in it. That's what we do when we honor something. We have tremendous respect for it. We don't turn our back to it. We don't try to escape it. If we honor, no, it's the exact opposite. Now, oftentimes it's what we want to do, right? Oh man, this grief, it is too hard. I want it to be done. I want it away from me. It just doesn't work like that. I have a friend in a church group in my church. He's a good man. And he experienced a loss about a decade ago. And this was before I knew him. And now in this case, it was divorce. He was divorced, and the divorce was the result of an infidelity with his wife. And I won't go into the details, but it's one of those situations that was very difficult for him. His world very quickly flipped upside down, and it tumbled him hard. And according to him, years later, in telling me this. He didn't attend to his grief. He didn't attend to his loss. Now, he didn't call it honoring his grief. He didn't know. He was explaining his story. But what he explained to me were the things that, the opposite of what we just talked about, that he avoided it. He dismissed it. He didn't want to feel it. And he was running a successful company. He had people in his life. And he just kept moving on. Well, unfortunately, he sunk into a deep depression. And I didn't even know that much about depression until I learned from him really what it can do to somebody and really what that experience can be. And this is a good man. He's a strong man. And to hear this from him, to hear what this depression and what this experience was for him, just really opened my eyes. But his discovery was the same as what we just discussed here about honoring grief. What he learned was he didn't attend to what he needed to, which was his loss, which were these feelings, which was that hurt that he needed to face. So he avoided it. The problem is grief. Well, grief is obnoxious. It keeps coming back around. Doesn't really leave you alone. And it didn't leave him alone. In fact, it came back around on him like a monster. So not only did the grief from his loss still exist and he needed to deal with that, but now he had to deal with a real problem of depression on top of it. That is difficult. So honoring our grief is an important cornerstone, not just for the holidays, but across the board. When we lose, when we grieve, attend to it. Also, forfeit to it. Surrender to it. Surrender to your grief. Let it involve you. When we surrender to something, right, we allow it to kind of take its will upon us. It doesn't mean we don't have any control over it, but it's important to drop our defenses. Drop those guards and those shields. Those things that are preventing us from really addressing those things. If any of you are familiar with my book, you've heard in there the statement to go to the dark place. Don't be afraid to visit the dark place where those dark memories hide and those hurtful emotions are waiting. Visit those. It's important. You need to face them. They're not going to leave you alone. They won't go away. What that does when you face those difficult emotions, it lessens the power of them. Okay? And the memories and the issues involved in there, that doesn't go away. You carry that with you. But now you do so when the energy around that is diffused. It's dissolved. It doesn't have the same strength and threat that it once had. So if you turn to those and you face those, you diminish their strength. And that, in turn, will empower you to grow in a healthy manner. Lastly, trust your grief. Trust it. It's natural. Loss is designed into our humanity. None of us really want to experience it. Of course we don't. But it's real, and it's important, and it's necessary. It's our design. So that's why there's this imbalance, this miscalibration when we try to resist it. And we take that grief and we try to separate ourselves from it because by design it is necessary for us. And the more we resist it, the more we try to separate from it, the greater our imbalance. And that gap is anxiety, stress, burden, and all the things that we've been talking about that can do damage to us. So the more we can correlate those two, the more healthy we're going to be. So trust your grief. It's okay. It's not easy, but but it's okay. Christmas is like no other holiday. If I think about the opposite side of the calendar, I think about summertime and I think about Independence Day, the 4th of July. What a comparison, right? I mean, yes, it's the opposite side of the calendar, but wow, in terms of some of the emotion that consumes us with Christmas, it's almost the opposite with Independence Day. That's a holiday of just freedom and fun. We don't really have to hold ourselves to a commitment for anything. It's quite nice. A few years after my wife passed away, I took my 2 young daughters to Orlando for a little vacation. It was right around the 4th of July. It wasn't over that weekend, but it was right around the time. And we did go to Disney, although it wasn't a Disney trip. We didn't stay on the property and things like that. We just spent more time kind of exploring around. We went swimming, played mini golf, had a great time. And we did the bumper cars. You guys had bumper cars when you were a kid? Now, I was 40 years old, and I still love these things. And it was a great experience because you stand in line, and you're behind the gate, and you can see the chaos and all the collisions happening, and your energy's already kind of elevating, and you're kind of getting excited. And then you look for the cars. Oh, well, green's my favorite one, but it's my favorite color, but that red one seems to be the quickest. They're all the same. They all go the same speed. But right, you think, oh, that one's the one I want. That's the best one. And then once the gate opens, right, and everybody comes scrambling out into the track, and the kids are running around, and the kids are so quick. They scramble and they hop right into the cars, and even if you have your eye on the red one, it's unlikely you're going to get it because some little kid's going to hop in it. Right, but then you get in the car, and you get in this thing, and you tuck yourself in, you buckle in tight, and everything's padded up, and you're ready to go. Ha-ha. You wait, and then the light goes green, and the alarm sounds, and off you go. Yeah, boom, boom, and the collisions start. Boom. And there's no compassion with bumper cars, right? I mean, I'm a 40-year-old man, and here I am, here's some little kindergartner in a car, boom. Too bad, kid, you know? And meanwhile, I'm getting hit. So it's a blast. But it's interesting that how tightly that correlates with the experience of grief, particularly during the Christmas season. It's like, how often do we kind of get into our own little bumper car, our little world, and our thoughts, and our problems, and our desires, and our expectations, and off we go. We want what we want. And we're bang, 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 bang. I mean, back when we actually could go to the mall, right? We saw it in full display. All the lines and the crowd and people arguing with the clothes and skipping in line, and right? Everybody's in their own little car, banging around, trying to get theirs. So when we grieve, right, that we just it kind of consumes us. We kind of become very small into our own little bumper car. Try to protect ourselves. And if we need to, we'll bang into other people because it's about us. It's natural. I mean, I'm not blaming here. It's what we do. It is a protective mechanism. The pads in the bumper cars protect us, and sometimes when we're grieving and we're hurting, right, we need protection. It's like when you bang your nail with a hammer, or your thumb with a hammer. First thing you do, right? Oh, you protect it. It's a wound. It's painful. We nurture it. That's what we do with our grief. We close ourselves in. So it's natural, and it's okay to do that. But we have to also keep in mind that can become a problem, because if we do that for too long, and we don't pay attention to the relationships that we have around us, bumper cars, collisions, conflict, particularly during the holiday season. So we're going to walk through a few things here that can hopefully help us minimize those collisions. Hopefully lessen the damage of the impact when they occur. So for those of you here, you have a handout in front of you. And for those of you online, there's a handout. Now, you don't need to look at these now. These are really just for future reference so that you can take these with you. And for you online, this document, there's a handful of pages here and some worksheets. This can be found on our website, the Grief Training Center of Wisconsin. I'll give you the address real quickly. It's www.grieftrainingnow.com. www.grieftrainingnow.com. You go into the website, go to the Resources tab in the menu, scroll right down to the bottom, Resources tab, scroll to the bottom, and you'll see this. See an image of this, Coping with Grief in the Holidays. Click on it, and you can have access to this. You can review it online, you can print it out, you can share it, okay? You don't have to do it now, but this is available for you, because in here, there's a couple of worksheets, a couple of outlines that might help you. It might even help your family in the holidays. I'll start with one of them here, which is really kind of point one in terms of coping with grief over the holidays. So the first thing is to make a plan. Make a plan. And it doesn't need to be complicated. In fact, we've got a little guideline for you right here, and I'll read these questions to you. But first, prior to making a plan, any plan, it's prudent that we identify our values. Identify what's important to us. What's important to you for this holiday season? I mean, what's really important? Where are some things that, okay, maybe you can make a concession with? Maybe not that important at all. Maybe there's things that used to occur when your loved one was alive, might not just not happen anymore. What are some of those things? I'll briefly read through these questions to give you an understanding of where we're going with this. Question number one, what do you enjoy most about the holidays? What makes the holidays special for you? Question two, what about the holidays has been most stressful? If you look at holidays past, what are the things that really were tough to handle? Are those some things maybe this year that you can try to distance yourself from? Those some things that you maybe can carve out of the expectations to protect yourself from that? What are your expectations for the holidays since your loved one has died? What are your expectations? And keep in mind, the beauty of this is it is very simple. But it's amazing how infrequently we really think about this stuff. I know I rarely do. Especially after my wife died. I wish I had this sheet because I got right in my bumper cars and I went right onto the track for the holidays. Hope for the best. What I didn't know is that I had my own expectations. I didn't think about what they were. I never prompted myself to. But I had my own expectations for how I wanted things to be, who I wanted to see, what I wanted it to be for my children. And the more I did that, the more I set this expectation, the more I also created a risk to be disappointed. So it's very helpful to take the time, think through this a little bit. You might be surprised at what you find. And what it's going to really help do is simplify some of these important things for you. Because when the mess starts to come into play, and as you know, grieving, things can get messy real fast. It turns really quickly. Happy, sad, joyful, miserable. Sad, sad, sad. Right? No rhyme or reason to it. So through the holidays, it's going to be helpful to have a bit of a guideline, little bit of something that's you have as a framework to think, all right, if things don't turn out the way I was hoping, maybe I didn't even know what I was hoping. Things don't turn out a certain way, that maybe can help diffuse my emotion around it. Maybe some of the people around me and my family have their own expectations. I can bring some light to that. Maybe reduce the chance of conflict. Here's a question. What do you need from others to help you meet these expectations for the holidays? What might you need from other people in your life? Think about it. It can be very simple. And then I invite you to the last question, to wonder what might they need from you. Ask them, what expectations do you have for me? They probably have some, and maybe they haven't thought about it. And just making the awareness of that can really help. Can help prevent some of those conflicts from misunderstandings. Because when we misunderstand and we haven't gone through this, it's real easy for us to stay in that bumper car and just bang, bang, bang. While other people are doing the same thing, trying to fulfill their own expectation for the season. So the second point, prepare to adjust. Prepare to adjust. Things have changed. That special person in your life, they're not here. Maybe it's that family member, maybe it's that dear friend. Okay? It just might not be the same. Prepare for that. Give yourself permission to adjust. Some of the things that they were, it just aren't going to be that way again. Be prepared for that. For me, one of the things that I had to adjust to, Christmas cards. I didn't think about it. A simple little thing like Christmas cards. When my wife was alive, Christmas cards went out. Some had pictures, all these nice cards. Now maybe it's a guy thing, right? But when she died, the Christmas cards stopped. I had a lot of other things going on. Young children, responsibilities, the weight of grief. Christmas cards quickly made it to the end of the list. Something that I had to dismiss. Now, a couple of years later, I discovered they were important. And not so much to me, but to my kids. Because what they saw as they were growing up every year were cards coming in. Cards from our family and friends and neighbors, right? They come in, someone have the nice picture, and we tack them up on the refrigerator or on the front door. So what I didn't notice was my children were looking at these pictures every year, grieving because of what they didn't have. They didn't quite have the family that was pictured in those beautiful little cards. Theirs was a bit different. And they didn't get to share their family with others because the cards didn't get made and they didn't go out. Dad didn't do it. It was a hard one for me, you guys. The simple thing like a Christmas card, you would think in the whole arena of grief that would be a big deal. That one's hard for me. Because if I'm honest with myself, I'd like to say, gee, if I could do it over again, I would change that. I'd make those cards. I'd send those out. But you guys, honestly, I probably wouldn't. Because I knew my kids were disappointed. And I didn't have it in me to do it year after year. It was something that I had to simplify, something that I had to adjust to. And that's an example of the pain of grief and the loss. Okay, so prepare for that. There's certain things that you might have to sacrifice. If you think through it, if you think through that list a little bit, hopefully, you keep the right things on your list and you don't let the busyness and the hustle of the season fog that. If I had this list back then, I might have had Christmas cards in that first category. Could have changed an awful lot. Number 3, allow new traditions. Allow new traditions, allow them. Doesn't necessarily mean go out and create them or intentionally do something different, but allow them to happen. Traditions and rituals, particularly in the Christmas season, tend to be very important. Just like the example of the Christmas cards for my kids, right? That's a little tradition for each of us, a little ritual that comes around. And there can be all sorts of things in your tradition. Maybe it's baking Christmas cookies. Maybe it's meeting with a certain friend. Maybe it's all sorts of different things. Whatever it is can be important to you or to your family. Allow yourself to let some new traditions bloom after the loss of a loved one. The story of a family who's quite a big family, number of adult siblings, and they had a number of grandchildren. And they always had these big family gatherings for Christmas. And Grandpa, every Christmas Eve, would sit down and read "'Twas the Night Before Christmas." I mean, what a hallmark scene that must have been. One year Grandpa died. And the siblings didn't really plan for it. They didn't really plan to adjust. They didn't really think about what that was really going to be like. I'm sure it was on their mind, but they didn't really do anything different. And sure enough, everybody came together on Christmas Eve. And as the time neared, the adults didn't say anything. It was the elephant in the room. Right? Grandpa was dead. Everybody knew it. But they avoided the topic. Just continued to go about their traditional holiday cheer. Until one of the grandchildren finally said, "Hey, you guys, who's going to read 'Twas the Night Before Christmas?" Grandpa's dead. Right? Count on a child to say it like it is. Of course, the adults were mortified. Oh man, now what? Right? The cat's out of the bag. Like we didn't know that Grandpa already passed away. But now it's a topic, and it was a topic, for them right now. Now they've got to decide. Didn't have a chance to plan for it. They did, right? And then what do the adults do? Well, some of them, that's not for me. Nope, not me. Sis, maybe you do it. Oh no, wow. It started to create some anxiety, some sadness, because now the void of Grandpa not being there, they could really feel that. Of course he wasn't there, but now becoming a bit of a problem. The oldest grandchild steps up and says, I'll read it. Sure enough, this kid sits down, grandchildren gather around, and so do the adults, and he reads to the family, "'Twas the Night Before Christmas." And since then each year, now the grandkids take turns. That has become their new little tradition. So rather than that being something that is dismissed, that is buried, people wonder about, and people have to feel the sadness about that and the coldness, now because they've allowed that new tradition, and it's something that bloomed in a way that they couldn't predict. Now every year they get to really experience something special, and in doing so, honor Grandpa. Allow new traditions. I've got one more, only because I'm going to squeeze this one in. A good friend of mine, one of my best friends, has a similar story. In this case, his family, they lost their mother a couple of years ago. They don't have as many grandchildren and so forth, but I guess Mom used to do the cooking. And it was the traditional cooking, the big feast and the home-baked pies and everything. It was a big production for her, and she spent weeks preparing for it all. And everything was very well done. She was a great cook and a great baker. Now she's gone. So you've got these kids. Well, now what? Similar to the story about was the night before Christmas. Their new tradition that they've created is now the adult kids end up each year deciding what meal they're going to cook, and then that certain sibling cooks the meal. And some of them are not very good cooks. And now it's become kind of fun because they tease each other about it. And sometimes it's Italian, sometimes it's tacos. But now that that's something that they can have fun with and enjoy over the holiday season as a family while still honoring their mother. It's a beautiful story. I wanted to squeeze that in there. It's another example of allowing a tradition to be created rather than trying to force our way through something that was. Point number 4. Communicate your needs and wants. Communicate your needs and your wants. And do so with compassion. Because a lot of times when we communicate our needs and wants, right, I think, all right, I'm going to tell you I'm going to tell you what I need. Boom, boom, boom. And it becomes more of a demand. Kind of like the bumper cars, right? I'm going to make sure that my voice is heard. Without having compassion for what the recipient of that might feel like. You know what it feels like when someone's demanding and setting their expectations for you. It's not very pleasant. So it's important to communicate our needs and wants, but to do so with compassion. Make people aware of your intention. And communication, I know it's always it's the answer to everything. It's the tagline to everything, communicate. In this case, it really matters. By this time, you'll already have created the things that were important to you. You'll already know some of the areas that you're going to compromise or some of that you're going to scratch off the list. So you're going to have a framework. Share that with the people who are important to you. Ask them maybe what their needs and wants are. A woman that came through the Grief Training Center a few months ago had a story similar to, for Christmas time, where she's got 2 sisters, small family, and her mother passed away. She's the oldest of 3 daughters. And they usually would get together for the holidays, and Dad wanted nothing to do with it. He was grieving loss. He lost his wife. He didn't want to come over and enjoy the holidays. He didn't want to do anything. He wanted to talk. He didn't want to be entertained or entertain. He wanted to stay home, do his thing. He was fine with that. That's what he wanted to do. The oldest daughter wanted him to participate. Dad, come on, join us. So in the days approaching Christmas Day, they started to debate that, began to argue about it. Sadly, it got to the point where the relationship soured. I mean, that Christmas was destroyed for the family. Not only did they lose their mother, and this poor man lost his wife, but now there's a dispute in the family. And it went on for months, and the daughter and the dad, they weren't even talking. I mean, what a shame. You're carrying the burden of grief through the holidays, and now you have this newly created dispute with the ones that matter to you the most. They ended up talking months later to discover, had the daughter asked, as opposed to just demanded, she would have discovered that her father didn't want the activity. He didn't want to be entertained. He was sad. He was honoring his grief. He was allowing himself to be sad at a time when you're not supposed to be sad. But she didn't want that. She didn't want to allow that. Didn't want to permit him to do that. What he discovered was that his oldest daughter was grieving the loss of her mom, who she loved dearly. And on Christmas, she really needed her dad. And he wouldn't make himself available to her. It was very hurtful. Had those two just communicated their needs and wants prior to Christmas, what could have been saved? Christmas was destroyed. Months of sour feelings and anger, only for a conversation? Don't let it happen. Identify your needs and wants, and then communicate with those who are important to you. And then ask them, what might theirs be? You might be pleasantly surprised, and at worst, you'll avoid some conflict. Point number 5, perform to your ability. Recognize this year, you just might not be able to handle some of the things that you did in the past. You might not even know when that strength is going to ebb and flow. Because, as you know, grief is so unpredictable. So, manage your ability. Allow yourself an exit plan. So if there is a commitment, or something that you might want to do, or something you might want to be a part of, invite yourself into that, or accept that invitation, but do so with an exit plan. Knowing that, I might not be able to really deliver. I don't know how I'm going to feel on that day. I don't know how I'm going to feel hour to hour. So allow that, and then communicate that. It can be of great value. The next year, that same father and daughter, they did get together. It was a different scenario. This time their wants and needs were communicated. They pulled together as a family. But they knew, and that oldest daughter knew, that Dad might just stay a little while. Because he told them, he said, look, I'm going to come. I know it's important to you. I'm going to do that for you because you're my daughter and I love you. But if at some point I disappear, it's okay. Because there's going to become a point that I might recognize that I just want out, and I'm going to just sneak out the garage door, and don't worry, Dad's fine. Don't call me, don't text me, don't make a big deal out of it. That's my exit plan. Can you please accept that? And she did. That's exactly what happened. Came over and had a wonderful little time, and then at some point, he had had enough, whatever that enough was for him, out he went. And it was understood. It was appreciated. No sour feelings, no arguments. So you can understand, if you just look at those two people, that father and daughter, how she allowed him to honor his grief. She honored his grief. He honored hers when he discovered that she needed him, even though he didn't want to show up. They gave themselves permission to adjust expectations, compromise in a few areas. They allowed some new traditions to form, some new behaviors. They communicated needs and wants. And look at what happened. It all worked. So, disputes, conflict, surprises, those can be diminished if you handle things in a certain way. And it comes from really kind of laying out those values and those things that are important to you. And then thinking about how to share those with people in your life. And at least, if those collisions occur in those bumper cars, can minimize the impact. Point number 6, last point. With all of this, we talked about the challenge of grief, the challenge of the holidays, the pain that can occur, do not forget to allow yourself to experience joy. It's there. Sometimes very difficult to see. Sometimes it only comes in glimpses, but it's there. There were a lot of times that I disallowed myself to experience joy. The thing that I needed the most in my darkness of grief, I prevented myself from having. I would shame myself if I started to have a good time, because I felt maybe I'm disrespecting my wife. Maybe I didn't care enough. Maybe I should show that it really matters to me. I need to be miserable, because that's what grieving is. Sometimes I just didn't want to be miserable. Sometimes I was actually having a really good time. Allow it. Celebrate that. Sometimes people might even try to take that away from you. They might not understand that. Well, how can he be having such a good time? Just lost his wife. Maybe he's in denial. Right? Maybe he's not accepting it. Sometimes they pull me aside. Hey, look, you really need to. It's okay to cry. Well, I know it's okay to cry. I cry every night. 3 a.m. You should see what it's like. It's a mess. But right now, I don't feel like crying. I'm happy right now. So give yourself permission to experience that joy. It matters, because that is in here. That joy is in here. So is everything else. But occasionally, when it comes along, you can grab onto it. You can hold that. Say, yes, this is what Christmas is about. And I got it, and I'm not letting it go. I greatly do honor the time that I've had to speak with you tonight. I appreciate your experience. And I wish you a very Merry Christmas. Thank you.